When we talk about this VCS, VCS stands for version control system. Let's try understanding what exactly this version control system is all about and how does that work or helps us in any certain given scenario. The term version control is used to describe the process of saving various copies of any particular project or a file, or you can say a set of files. So these copies are saved in order to ensure that you are keeping a track of changes made to those files. For example, this is my original file. Then I made some changes. I made one change. Now what I'll do is I'll keep this with me here in my database, and then I'll also keep this changed one into my database. So at every possible step, whenever I make a change or whenever I make an update, I will ensure that I am keeping a track of that. I'm ensuring that I am keeping those details with me. I'm storing those things into my database. So when we talk about the version control, it typically involves a database that stores the current version of your file, and along with that, the historical versions of your file. Now, what does this helps us with? This helps us in multiple things. If you make a mistake, you have a way to go back, right? You have a way to revise. If you make a, let's say, project that requires a lot of teams to work together, then at the same given time, they can use their own copies and they can work on them parallelly, right? So any previous question that we have talked about, like what if we make a mistake? What if we want to work together? What if we want to look into the history of the progress? All these questions are answered with SVC. SVC, which is software version control, or you can say version control system. Now, another aspect of VCS is the ability to branch and merge the code that is built independently. Now, what is this? Let's understand. Let's say this is my project. Okay.
If you enjoyed the content of the video, don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe to our channel.
Now, there are 3 teams that has to work on it. So instead of making changes onto the main project, what I'll do is I'll create a branch out of it, which will be used by the developer 1 team. Then similarly, I'll create another branch out of it and another one like this. Now let's say developer team 1 added 2 features into the program. Then developer team 2 added 3 features into the program. Similarly, 2 features were added here as well. Now these changes will only make an impact into the branches that they are working on, not onto the main trunk, you can say. Like if you think of a tree, there is a trunk and then there are multiple branches, right? But this is very useful for us. So if you are writing a code on a part of an application, that could make an impact on some other part. So what you do, you create a separate branch and you work on it. Once you are done, once your other teams are also done, you can merge that code together. You can bring them all together and put it into the main trunk. So once the code is written and there are no conflicts, the code can be merged back into the main trunk. That's how it helps. Then you all must have heard of a very, I would say, famous version control system, which is Git. Git is the most commonly used version control system today, right? So Git is something that can help us in achieving all this. Let's try understanding Git a little bit. When we talk about Git, Git is basically, you can say, the version control software or version control system that can help us with whatever we have discussed as of now. So the good to know fact is that it was created by the father of Linux, who is known as Linus Torvalds. And this was introduced in 2005. So now many people confuse Git with GitHub. Git is a different thing. GitHub is a different thing. GitHub is not Git. GitHub is, you can say, a kind of social networking platform, just like you have Instagram. On Instagram, you post your images, right? You post about your day, you put up your stories, you basically, if you go for a vacation, you take your pictures and you post on Instagram. On GitHub, you simply post your projects. So it's basically the Instagram for projects. So I created a project. I want to use it and I want to basically uh, show it to everyone. I want to put it on a particular social platform where everyone can look into it, they can learn through it, or maybe suggest me some changes, can comment on it. So that is what GitHub is. And in order to manage the files, in order to maintain the versions of files, in order to look into the history of files, there we require Git. So that is the difference between Git and GitHub. Now, Git, as I mentioned, keeps the tracks of your files. So how does that track is taken care of? Let's talk about that. Git basically maintains three structures, or you can say three trees. When we talk about Git, Git maintains three structures. The first one is local workspace. Then we have got staging area. And finally, head repository. Now, what is this repository word? Repository is simply, you can say, a folder or any area where you store something. You can also call it repo. Local workspace is your place where your where your code files are stored, your images, your documents are stored. Then staging area is, you can say, a area that is there between the final destination and the source location. So it is a middle area in which the files are staged first, or the changes are committed. Then there is this head repository, which is where you put up all your files, right? Now, when the file go through these different stages of Git, they get into various situations also. They basically get into various kind of statuses as well. So there are various statuses. Let's talk about them. So when a file goes through the Git life cycle, it includes various status. The first status is untracked. So when you first create a file in your Git directory, that file, for example, is something that you don't want to get tracked, that you don't want uh, to be analyzed or to be tracked by the Git, that is the file which you will keep as untracked, right? So the freshly created file will always be an untracked file. So any file that possibly contains the passwords or something that is temporary, you will be deleting that soon. So that is something that you will keep as untracked. Now, if you want the Git to start tracking a file, you will use the command git add for starting tracking. So git add is the command that is used for started tracking. Now let's say you started tracking a file, but you didn't make any change into it. So till the time you don't modify it, the file will be known as unmodified. So this is basically a tracked file which is included in the Git repository or Git repo, but there has not been any change in that. So that will be known as unmodified. Now, let's say you made some changes. So as you can guess, the status will be known as modified. So a modified status is where Git see that you are working on a certain file, but you haven't yet told Git to make those changes or to update those changes. So if you are ready to add a changed file to the staging area, that is again where you can use the git add command. Then once you have executed the file to the staged area, the file status will be known as staged. Once it is into the staging area, the file status will be known as staged. And you can say if from here you want to push it to the um, head repo or the local repo, then there you need to use another command git commit, which is used for committing the changes. So you can say there is this untracked status where your Git is not tracking your file, right? Let me write it again. Untracked is there. Then we have learned about unmodified. Then we have learned about modified. Then we have talked about the staged. So these are the four status of the Git life cycles, right? If it is untracked, so you will add it, right? You will add it to the Git tracking state or Git repository. Once you add it, it will get into the unmodified state. From here, if you make any change into the file, if you edit that file, it will get into the modified state, right? If you edit or if you make any modification into the file, it will get into the edit state. Here, if you run the git add command again, it will get into the staged mode. So you can say if you stage the file, it will get into the staged mode. Then if you for example commit those changes, then basically it will be those changes will get committed and those changes will be visible in the head repo as well. So if at any point you want to see in what status your file is in, there you can use the command get status. This is used to check status of file. So get status will give you the current state of the files that are there in your directory. These are few things that we had to learn. Now again, if I talk about commands that we use for pushing the file from one area to the other area. So if we talk about those areas, then we have talked about the working directory, right? Where my code will be stored. Then I have talked about the staging area. Then there is this local repo. And finally, there is this remote repo as well. Now, what is this remote repo? Remote repository is, you can say, a remote directory where your files are getting stored. So you are keeping a track of your files locally on your device, as well as you are sending it to a remote location so that if you, for example, whenever you want to make a change or whenever you want to switch back to a previous version, you can use that remote repository to get those details from the directory, right? So if your file is in the working directory, you have just started working on it, you'll be using the command git add. And git add will take it to the staging area. So this git add command will take it to the staging area. Here, if you make any changes, you will have to commit them, which will take it to the local repo state, or you can say we'll make those updates into the local repo. Now from here, if for example, I also want to make those changes in the remote repo, then I would use git push. Similarly, if for example, there is some other team also which is working on the remote repo, and we want to fetch those updates from the remote repo to the local repo, then we go for pull command. Like that. This is how the git is basically used. Or this is how the git commands are basically used, I would say. Now the question is that how to install Git and how to use it in our devices, right? How to get Git basically installed in the device, that is again a question. So for that, let me share my other screen and give you a tutorial. So here's my browser. If on my browser I go and I try searching for Git, all I need to do is I need to type the URL git-scm.com. So again, I have already explained you the difference between Git and GitHub, right? So right now we are trying to understand how to get Git installed in our devices. So for Windows or Mac, all you need to do is you need to visit this site and then you have to click on the option of download for Windows or download for Mac. Then whatever operating system you have, you can go with that option. If you have 32-bit, you can go with that version, otherwise 64-bit. Once you download this, you will get the ability of installing it by simply opening the installer. And once you have opened it, you will be able to just simply go with the default settings by saying next, 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 you can install it. Once the installation is done, you will find something called as Git Bash in your device. Now, Git Bash gives you two options. It gives you the option of using GUI, which is going to look something like this. And then it also gives you the option of using Git CMD, which is going to look something like this. If I go with the GUI, it is pretty much obvious. Then I can select these options and I can create my Git commands work, or I can make my Git commands work. Or otherwise, there is this option of Git CMD where I can run my commands directly to make it work. So either you can use Git Bash, that is going to open up like this, or otherwise the Git CMD. Both will do the same thing for you. Now the question is how to get started, right? So what I'll do is I'll create a folder where we'll add some files. So on my desktop, I'll create a folder called DevNet, and that I'll open up using VS Code. Or otherwise, I can navigate through my Git Bash also. Now, in order to work with Git, you need to know some of the commands that work with the Linux operating system. ls is one of them that basically lists down all the files and directories that you have in your um, particular folder. Then cd is used for changing directory. CD, that stands for change directory, can help you in switching between the folders. So using cd, I'll go inside desktop, and there I have added the folder devnet, which I'm going to land into. See, now if here I say ls, we don't have any files inside the devnet folder. Now let me open the same folder in the VS Code. So this is my VS Code. I'll go to file, I'll go to open folder. Then in the box, I'll type, we have got desktop, and here I'll type devnet. So we are into the devnet folder. I'll select this folder, and there you go. We don't have any files inside it, but we'll get started. We'll create some files and we'll try to analyze them through Git. So in order to get started, what I have to do is I have to get into my working directory. So inside this, I'll create some files. I'll create a README file. And then I'll add a Python file, let's say test.py, inside which I'll add simple code, let's say input or name is equals to input bracket, enter your name, and I can say print name, right? That's my simple code. Then similarly, age is equals to input bracket, enter your age, and then you can say print age. Now I have created two files inside this, readme.md, and I have created test.py, right? Now, if I go into my git bash, and I want to basically use this folder, or I want to work with this folder as a Git folder, what I need to do is I need to run the command git init. This will basically start initialization of my directory. Now you can see the moment I have executed git init command, it has given me U next to the files, right? It is telling U after readme and U after test.py as well. What is this U? U stands for untracked. So if I say git status, you can see there are untracked files, which is readme.md and then test.py. Now I want to, now currently they are basically in the, you can say untracked state. So if I, for example, want to um, start tracking them. So do you remember what command I have told you about? The command is git add, right? If I want to start tracking a file, what I need to do is I need to say git add and then specify the file that I want to start tracking. So what I'll simply do is I have just checked the status. The files that I have inside my directory, both are not being tracked. So I'll try to add them. If I say git add and I specify the file name like this, readme, then it will just add readme file, right? Similarly, if I specify the name test.py, then it will just add the file that I have as test.py. But if I say git add and then use a simple dot, this will add all the files of my directory and will start tracking them. Now, if I check git status again, so you can see it has removed the untracked files. And now it says that we have got two files which are unmodified, changes to be committed into readme.md and test.py. So we have no changes here, but yeah, if for example, I make any changes, then they'll be known as modified files. Let's verify that also. If for example, I say enter your current age like this, and I go back to my bash and I say git status. So you can see it has modified, or we can say we have got some modifications into the test.py file. Now, what I'll do is I'll create a remote repo on my GitHub. So I'll go to GitHub, I'll there create a remote repo where I'll commit these changes and push these changes. So what I'm going to do is I'll simply, first of all, you can say here I'll commit these changes. I'm going to say git. So when I say git commit, basically I'm specifying that I have made some changes and I want to execute them. So I'll say git commit -m, and there you have to add a message. So every time you commit some changes, you have to specify what changes you have made or what updates you are making, so that when you go into the history, when you look into the history by scrolling through GitHub, then you can understand that what was my first commit about, what was my second commit about, then so on. So here you can give a brief description about what changes you have made. So you can say, I'll simply say first commit. I'll use the message as first commit like this. Get commit -m first commit. Then if I again check get status, so we basically have committed the changes, two files changed, and then these changes were just committed into the local repo. Still, we are supposed to add them to the remote repo, right? For which I'll go to GitHub and create a repository. So I'll go to my browser again. Here I'll search for GitHub. Then if I go to the official page, we have got the option of signing up or signing in. I'll simply go with my username as I already have my account. And it's very easy to create an account on GitHub. So you can simply go to sign up and then create your files. Then once you sign up, you will land onto a page like this. Here, if you go to profile, you have got various options. The one I'll go inside is repositories. So I'm going to create a remote repo. I already have one. I'll create a new one. Here I have to give a name to my repo. So I will name it as PCNE, let's say. So it will check whether that name can be used or not, because this is again a social platform. So just like it checks whether a particular username is available or not, or whether a particular, you can say, email address is available or not, just like that, it will also check whether a particular repo name is available or not. So that PCNE name is there. Description, you can say demo repository, whether that is going to be publicly available or you want to work just privately with it, you can select that. Then we have got the option of adding a README file. So you can say this is, as you can see, this is not necessary, but it's better to always add it, as it can be used as giving a description about your project. So we already have it in our directory, so I'm not going to create another one. That's why I'm not checking this. Then I'll simply say create repository. Once you create the repository, it will also show you these commands. Now you can see that we can use this command to add any detail inside my README file. So if I go to my VS Code, I open the terminal, I can access the git commands here also. And I use this command that is being suggested by GitHub. I'll simply copy it. I'll paste it here, enter. And if you see the README file, it has been added with this information. Now we'll see how this change will look like later. Right now, I have added some information inside my README file. Then after that, if you go back to GitHub, if you see the GitHub, we have already started initialization. We have already added the README file. We have made some commits as well. Then this is how you commit some changes into a particular branch. And this is how you add it to a certain remote repo. So currently in my repo, if you see, if I go and check my repo, PCNE, there is no files, right? There are no files. So if I want to add something, some directory into a remote repo, then what I need to use is I need to use this particular command, get remote add. Origin is basically the remote repo name, and then the URL of the repo, which you can simply copy from here. If you copy it from here, you can go back to git bash, and then there I'll use the command get remote add origin, and then paste the URL. But this command will only work if I have configured Git correctly, which means that the very first time that I open my Git, I need to connect my Git with the GitHub account, right? So if I execute this command, in my case, it will work, but in your case, it will not, right? Because you haven't configured it. So let's understand how to configure the Git before we can simply push something into a remote repo. So if I want to connect my Git with GitHub, what I need to use is I need to say git config hyphen global. Now, global is a parameter that will work. You can say if, for example, you have multiple accounts, then you can go with a local version. Otherwise, you can go with the parameter global. So if you are taking global, it will be used for every change you make. So global user.name. Here you can specify what username you have. So I have it as Chirag01. So I'll take that, simply enter, and that is configured. To confirm that what you have set as your username, what you need to do is you need to type git config hyphen global and then user.name, enter. So it tells you that you have given the configuration of chiragdal01 as your username. Then after that, you need to add your email address also. What email should be used for making any change? So git config hyphen global user dot email and then specify your email address. I'll put mine. I missed on closing the quotation marks. Now, if I want to verify, I'll simply remove this value and hit the enter button, and it tells me that the email that is configured inside the Git is chiragdal2014@gmail.com. That's how you configure your email address. Then after this, you have already learned how to simply create the repository and so on. Once the repository is created, you can add your files. And now what I'll do is I'll simply try pushing these two files that I have, readme.md and test.py, into this remote repo, for which we have to simply run this command. So I can copy it from here and paste it here like this and hit the enter button. Once I make this enter button, once I execute this command, I will refresh my page. I'll go to my directory. I'll open PCNE. Here, if I see, if I go into projects, or I guess code, yeah. Here, if you see, we have got one unwatch. Okay, I missed on one thing, sorry. So we have just executed this command, right? Get remote add origin. And then we have added this URL. Now what I am doing here is I'm adding a remote repository with the name origin that is available at this URL. But I still haven't pushed my files, right? I missed on executing the second command, but started looking into the GitHub. So in order to push the files that are there in your directory uh, to this repo called origin, what you have to do is you have to say git push -u origin and then specify your branch name. Now, the branch name is again something that you need to set. By default, if you check the command git branch, so it is going to be called as master. But usually what we do is we set it as main. We call the main trunk with the name as main, because master is something that conveys something dominating, right? So instead of that, we go with the word main. That is the usual practice that is followed. So I'll change the name by saying grid branch -m, which is used for renaming, and then use the word main. Now again, if I say git branch, so you can see the name is changed to main. Now using this command get push -u origin, that is my remote directory, and then main, that is my branch name. By using this, I can push my files to the remote repo. So you can see here, there are some changes that have been made. Now, if I refresh this page, so my repository contains two files, readme and test.py, right? This is how the files are pushed into the remote repo. And if I make any change here, if for example, I do any configurations, I make any change, then I can ensure that those changes are getting updated to my remote repo also. Like if I open this test.py, it currently contains enter your age. But if I want to push these changes into my remote repo that I have made here over the VS Code, then I need to commit them like I mentioned earlier, right? I need to commit those changes, and then only I can see those changes into my remote repo as well. So let's see how these changes can be pushed and how these modifications can be saved. So currently we have got this file called test.py, and if I go and check my git status here, so we have got two files that are getting modified, right? So after these modifications are there, we have to add them. So I'll use the command get add space dot. Now if I again check the status by saying get status, so now these are modified. Now I need to commit these changes that I have made so that they can be updated into the final local repo. In order to commit them, we have the command git commit -m, then we have to specify the name of the commit. So you can say I'll name it as second commit or demo commit. Now you can see 2 files changed. If I check the status again, get status. So these are on branch main, then you can see your branch is ahead of origin. So there is one change that is extra in my local repo, which is taking me ahead from origin. Now, what is origin? Origin is the remote repo. If you remember, we have given it the name origin, right? So if I go and check my remote repo, which can be accessed using GitHub, and if I see this file, test.py, it still don't contain any change. If I see this readme.md, it still don't contain any information, right? So in order to update these changes into my, we can say remote repo, what I need to do is I need to go back to my VS Code and run the command, the same command that I executed earlier for pushing the changes, that is git branch, sorry, not git branch, you can say git push -u origin, that is my remote repo name, and then main, that is my branch name. Once I run this, it will take a little time. If I go back to my directory, now if I refresh this page, observe this. If I refresh this page, the changes are updated. See, current was not there earlier, but now it is there. If I check README, the PCNE is added into the README file. So that's how the updates are pushed to my you can say to my remote repo. These are few things that we had to learn related to the version control system. I hope this made sense to all of you, and this will help you in writing the scripts in a better manner and keeping a track of them using the version control system Git, right?